Hello everyone, welcome to another cloud computing episode at Enlear Academy. My name is Kasun and I am a Microsoft MVP for Azure. On today's video, I am going to show you how to deploy an application into Azure Kubernetes Service. In this tutorial, I show how to Dockerize an application into a containerized image and deploy the container registry and deploy that application into the Kubernetes service. Then we will go to see how the application is accessed from the internet. So let's get started. As a developer in an organization, you are going to use a Docker file to package up of your application into a Docker container. So in this scenario also, we are going to use a Docker file to package up of your application. So as a developer, you have a Docker file with you. So then we are creating an image from the Docker file. Then we will push that image into the container registry. In this case, we are going to use the Azure Container Registry. So it is a private container registry provided by Azure. So we can securely store our container image in the Azure Container Registry. Then we are using this container registry with Azure Kubernetes Service to push our images when the application needs, right? So whenever Kubernetes manifest request a specific image from this container registry, it will download it and deploy to the create a pod or container inside the Kubernetes cluster. So now let's see how it's going to happen. So you have the manifest here, right? So in this manifest, you are going to have your image reference. So when you put this manifest into the Kubernetes, it will go through the manifest and create a container, pod or deployment, whatever the resource you are going to specify in the manifest. So in this example, we are going to deploy two resources. One is deployment, then other one is service, right? So when you put this manifest, what will happen is it will create a deployment. Under the deployment, it will create a pod. So in this container specification, we are saying that to create the pod, we need to refer the image that we uploaded to the container registry. So it will go and refer the image registry and download it to the cluster. Then after that, it will create a pod. Then after the pod is created, what we'll do is we are going to expose the pod to a service. So to that one, that we are going to use Kubernetes load balancer service. So by using load balancer service, we are getting a public IP for this application. So when we use that public IP in your browser, then you can access the application there. So that's the high level overview of the architecture we are going to use. So next we will see how it's be done through the Azure CLI and other tools. Previously, we have looked into the architecture of deploying a simple web application, web server into the Kubernetes. So in that architecture, I have explained that how to deploy it through a Azure Kubernetes service, and we store our images in Azure Container Registry. Okay, now let's see how we can do it in action. So before we are going into this demo and see how it's going to happen, we need to confirm that there are few tools are installed in your environment. So these tools are very important to work this demo correctly. So first you need to have your Docker installed in a local machine. So it can be a Docker for Windows, Docker for Mac, or if you're using a Linux, you can install Linux. You can install Docker through the package manager. Then you need to have a kubectl, the Kubernetes command line tool. So it is very important. So it also can be installed in all platforms, Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. Then you should have an Azure subscription. So if you don't have an Azure subscription, you can go and create a free trial. So you will get $200 credit for a month. And then you need to have Azure CLI installed on your machine. So Azure CLI is a cross-platform tool. So it also can be installed in all three operating system, Linux, Windows, and Mac OS, right? So if you have all these prerequisite tools, then we can jump into the demo and see how we can deploy this in the Azure Kubernetes Service. Right? So as for the first steps, we need to have a subscription. So I assume that you guys already have a subscription with you. Then we need to do is we need to authenticate our Azure CLI with this specific subscription. So if you have multiple subscription, you need to specify the subscription you are working on, and we need to authenticate to that subscription. So now let's see how we can do this through Azure CLI. Okay. So to authenticate Azure, we need to use the command called AC login. So this is the Azure CLI command. So as I mentioned previously, you should have Azure CLI installed on your environment. So I will copy this AC login command, then I will paste it here, right? So when I'm run this command, you will get a sign in URL. So what you can do is you can open this URL in your browser. Then they will ask for a code. So you can paste that code in that box, then click next. Then you should select your Azure subscription email. So I'm not going to show this for you because it has my credentials. So that's the way it should be done. So when the authentication is completed, it will show you the available subscription in this command plane. So we'll wait a little bit time. So as you can see here, so it will show you all the subscription that are registered to your email address, right? So I have multiple subscription, so I'm going to select the specific subscription I'm going to work for. So therefore I'm going to use another command called AC account set dash then the subscription name or subscription ID. So if you have only one subscription, doesn't matter, it will by default select that subscription. So if you have multiple subscription, use this command. Okay. So I'm running that command, then it will be selected for my demo. Okay. Now we done our first step. So we authenticated to Azure CLI to the Azure subscription. So now we can run Azure commands and we can create different resources inside Azure. Right? So first thing we need to do is we need to create a resource group. So if you have any previous experience working with Azure, you know that any resources you created in Azure should come under the resource group. So we cannot create any resource without a resource group. So first thing, I will create a resource group. So for that we are using AC group create. Then we need to add parameters like dash name, the resource group name, then the location of the resource group. So I will copy this and I will paste it and run it. Right? Okay. So when it's completed, it will show you the detail of the resource group. So you can see the provisioning status is succeed. So now we can use this resource group to deploy our Kubernetes cluster and then relevant resources. Okay. So next we will go and we'll create a Azure container registry. So we need this container registry for our image repository. So when you are building our Docker file in local machine, then we are pushing it to this container registry, and this container registry will use the as a image repository in Azure Kubernetes service. So we'll go and create a container registry. So for that we are using ACR. ACR stands for Azure Kubernetes Container Registry. Then we'll use create. Then we are giving some parameters. The name parameter we'll use for the container registry name. Then -g is used for resource group. Then -- location, we can specify the location. Then the --sku is specifying the pricing tier of the Azure Container Registry. So we have multiple pricing tiers. Based on this pricing tier, the features will be different. So for this demo, the basic SKU is more than enough. So I will copy this one. Then I will run this command. Now it's okay. Now it's running. Okay. So the container registry is created, and you can see the output of the registry configuration, right? So now let's log into our Azure portal and see these container registries created. So I have enabled two-factor authentication, so it will ask for my authentication. Okay, so now I'm logging into my portal. Then in the resource group, I will select my resource group. Okay, so AKS demo. So then you can see the Azure Container Registry is created. Right. Now we can we verified that the container registry is created in my resource group, inside the resource group. Now let's go to the next step, that is creating the Kubernetes cluster, right? So for this demo, I'm using very basic Kubernetes cluster. So if you have a lot of configuration, you can pass those parameters into the same command, and you can modify your cluster creation based on your requirement. So in this command, I'm going to create a 2-node cluster. That means I have 2 worker nodes here. So for this one, I'm using a AKS command, then create, then I'm specifying the resource group, then the name of the cluster, then the number of nodes for the cluster, then I'm specifying to generate the SSH keys automatically. Then I have to give the node VM sizes. So in Azure, we have different VM sizes. So the supported VM sizes for AKS, we need to specify. Then this parameter is very important. So attach ACR. So when you create in the cluster, AKS cluster, we can directly attach our Azure Container Registry to the AKS cluster. So we don't have to separately authenticate the AKS cluster. It automatically authenticated each other and work side by side. So if you already have a Kubernetes cluster, we can attach our ACR into the existing Kubernetes cluster as well. So I will run this command. So to finish this one, it will take 10 or 15 minutes based on the number of nodes. So we'll run this command and we'll wait for the completion of the cluster. So after this will be finished, I will come back to you. Okay, now it's took around 3 to 4 minutes to complete it. So now the cluster is created. So as you can see here, and the cluster is on the running state. Our state is running. So that means the cluster is created. So let's go into the portal and see the cluster is created. Okay. So now I'm going to the portal. Then when I refresh the resource group, you can see that the AKS demo cluster is created. So in the Azure, when you create a AKS cluster, it will create another resource group with the relevant worker node resources and other networking resources. This resource is the managed service resource. So it's kind of a master node of the Kubernetes cluster. So if I go down in this resource group list, you can see MC underscore MySQL. Likewise, we create a different cluster. Right. So let's go and see. Okay, I will refresh this resource group list. Yeah. So you can see AKS demo, another resource group. So inside this resource group, you can find all the VM scale set, then the networking, public IP load balancers, and route tables and network security related to this cluster. Okay, now we created the cluster. Now next step is to authenticate the Kubernetes CLI with this cluster. So for that one, we can use the kubectl command, but first we need to download the Kubernetes certificates and credential data. So for that one, we can use the Azure AC AKS command. So if you go to the Kubernetes cluster manage node, in the overview, you have the option here button called connect. So here you can find the relevant 2 commands you need to run on with the AC command, right? So what I'll do is I will copy this one, AC AKS get credential, then my resource group name and the cluster name. Then I will run it on my command line tool. Okay. So I will copy it. Then I'm running it. So if you are running it for the first time, you won't get this command because they asked me to override the credentials because I already done a few demos before I do this one. So there are credentials there. So I'm going to override this one. Okay. Now we can use kubectl command to verify the cluster connection. So for that one, what I'll do is I will run kubectl get nodes. So what will happen from this command is it will show what are the worker nodes and running in my cluster. So when I type kubectl get nodes, you can see I have 2 nodes because I created only 2 node cluster. So you can see the version, then the status and the name of the node. Okay. Now we verified that the cluster connection and everything is working perfectly. Now let's go and create our application through the Docker file. So we'll go to create the Docker image through the Docker file. Right? Okay. So here under the sample app, I have my Docker file. So in this Docker file, what will happen is there's a very basic Docker file, not a complex one. So I'm using the Nginx. Then I'm copying my index.html file into the user share Nginx HTML. That's the place where Nginx serves the web content. So then I will run this Docker file and I will create a Docker container. Right? Okay. Okay. Now what I'll do is I will go to my sample application folder. So then what I'll do is in background, I think Docker is running. So no, the Docker is not running. So I'm starting the Docker. Okay. Now the Docker started. So if I type Docker you can see the commands help, Docker help, right? So that means the Docker is working correctly. So to create a Docker container image, so what you can have to do is you can use the Docker image build command. Okay. So what I'll do is I will type Docker image build Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tag the my image. So when you're using with ACR, you need to make sure that the tag is created with the name of the ACR. So we'll go to our portal and we'll take our Kubernetes, the Azure Container Registry name. So this is the login server name. So AKS demo sample dot Azure ACR azurecr.io. So I will copy this one. Then I'm using as my tag. Then I'm going to give the repo name. So sample app. Then if you have any versions, you can specify the version tag as well. So then we have to put dot. That means that the Docker file, if the Docker file is in the same root directory, then we can use dot. Otherwise, you have to specify the path to the Docker file. So now I'm going to build the Docker image. Okay. So it's building the image. Okay. Now the image is completed building. So now if I type docker image ls, so you can see my sample image is already there. So now we can use this image to run a container and see whether this application is working. So what I'll do now is I will push this image into the ACR, right? So then Kubernetes can use this image for the application deployment. So before you push, what you need to do is you need to authenticate the Docker with the ACR. For that one, we have to use the Docker login command with the login server name. Okay, now we'll go and see how we can authenticate our Docker command line tool with ACR. For that one, we need to use Docker login and then the login server name. So I will use this one. Then copy the username from the portal. Copy the username. Then the password, you can use either one of these two passwords. Copy it, paste it. Then I'm going to authenticate it, right? So the login is succeeded, right? So now what I can do is I can push this image into the ACR container registry. So for that one, I can use Docker image push, then the my image name, right? So my image name is sample app. It is then the image tag version 1. I'm pushing it to the container registry. So it will pushing my image in the layers. So you can see that last two layers will be pushed. Okay, now the image push is completed. Now we can go and see whether image is already there in the Azure Container Registry. So under Azure Container Registry, under the services, under the repositories, you can find your repository sample app. So if you go to the sample app, you can see different tag versions, tags. So you can click a specific tag and you can see the manifest of that tag. So if you want to download this image, you can use this Docker command as well. Okay. Now we verified that the image is there. Now we can go and create our Kubernetes deployment YAML, and we can use this image to deploy our sample web application. So I will copy this one because it will be needed in the future. Okay. Now we'll see how the Kubernetes deployment manifest will work, right? So here's a sample manifest here. So I'm not going to explain in detail on this manifest. I will do a separate video about these deployment services and any other Kubernetes resources. So in here we have deployment and service. So deployment is the place we are going to deploy our application. So here we have specifications specifying how many replicas we need and what are the labels you need to put for the deployment and containers. Then most important part is the spec. Under the template you have another specification. In there you have the containers. So here you can give a container name. Then this is the most important part, image. So here you can specify what is the image you are going to use for this container. Right. So here I'm going to use the my Azure ACR image path. So then you can specify ports you need to expose to from the container. Then under the services, we are going to use the load balance service, because with Kubernetes we have different type of service types. So load balance services allow us to access it from the public internet. So when you are putting load balance, it will allocate a public IP for this application, and we can access it from the public internet. Okay. Now we'll go and deploy this Kubernetes manifest to the kubectl. So I'm going back to the portal, the folder. Okay. For this one, we are going to use kubectl apply -f. We are going to for file path. So if the file is in the root folder, you can use this one, or if it is in a different file path, then you have to specify the absolute file path. So I'm going to use this file to deploy the resources. So to deploy it, now you can see deployment apps is created, service apps1 Nginx load balance service is created, right? So let's see whether it is created. So you can see you can type kubectl get pods, then dash watch to see. Yeah, so it's running state, right? So that means it already in a running state, the pod is running. So you can get more detail about this pod by describing the pod, or you can describe the deployment, right? So it's separate Kubernetes lesson. I will show you how to do it. Then we'll see whether service is allocated with the public IP. So you can see, you can get the kubectl get service. Then you can see there's a separate service created called apps1 Nginx load balance service. So its type is load balancer. Then you can see there's a external IP is allocated, right? So if I copy this external IP and I use my browser window to navigate it, you can see my simple hello world web application is running, right? So now you can see that we can access this web application from the outside world, public internet. So that's how we can easily deploy a web application into the Kubernetes. So you can see that with the less effort, we can deploy this application into the Kubernetes cluster, and we can expose it from to the public internet as well. So that's the demo for this quick introduction about how we can deploy a Kubernetes application into the Kubernetes. So in the coming videos, I will go into in depth on specific resource types in Kubernetes and specific scenarios, how we can use with Kubernetes. So until then, have a great day. So we'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.